Hey, what's up, guys? Professor Red Pill, Straight Talk, and I'm with Adam Maxwell, second chair from Liberty Rising Group, rather. Yeah, we're gonna be talking about the prison industrial complex. So, take it away, Adam.
Oh, thanks for having me. I know quite a lot about kind of general state of things and the government complexes, but I understand this is a topic where you have a lot more expertise than me. So I'm looking forward to learning along this discussion and adding my insights.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it's awesome having you. Like I said, we really get some deep dives in a lot of stuff, but this is a particular podcast that we've been talking about for a while now, and I think it's a good thing to get into it now because we're starting to see these complexes start to deteriorate from the inside out because of the lack of funding, the fake and gayness of the political leadership, and the fact that a lot of these governments are broke. I mean, we see this with New York, we see this with Los Angeles, where people are just going in and just stealing shit, and they don't have the beds, they don't have the capacity to incarcerate, so they just release. And I don't think it's partially probably because of the progressive nature and the DEI stuff, but I think a lot of it is just simply these states and the federal government is broke. They don't, they're using lawfare against political opponents. That costs money. That's a waste of resources. And let's just simply put it down that these industrial complexes, as I think it was Eisenhower was talking about for us to be aware of, right? His final address.
Eisenhower was about the military-industrial complex specifically.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, these complexes they're kind of they're not really a boomer invention, so to speak, but the boomers took full advantage of them, and the boomers profited off of these over their lifetime, and this is how they accumulated so much wealth, is from these complexes. And this is the problem we're dealing with today as millennials and Zoomers, dealing with the repercussions of the boomer greed and narcissism. So looking particularly in the prison industrial complex, it's a multi-trillion-dollar industry, or was multi-billion. Now it's a trillion. Basically, it's a trillion-dollar industry over a period of time. And we see the privatization of prisons. We've even seen privatization of law enforcement. So county sheriffs, what they'll do is in a lot of states in America, I don't know if it's different. You have different system in the UK, and in Europe, it's a lot different as well. But yeah, the sheriff gets big contracts for the incarceration. So the sheriff will put bids out for food, for sanitation, for clothes and things like that. And I don't know if you know Bob Barker. Have you heard of Bob Barker from the game show?
The Price is Right, I think.
Price is Right. Yeah. So Bob Barker actually has his own line of stuff that he sells to the prison industrial complex, to the federal prisons and the state prisons. This Bob Barker brand. So he sells like the different like all the stuff they wear, like the toiletries, the food, the soap, or not food, but soaps and different things. So it's big business, but for the most part, what I have seen and this prison industrial complexes is like we've seen in California and Florida, where there's a large significant population. Then with the influx of migration, economic migrants and whatnot over the last decade, there is no more beds. So a lot of these prisons and even the jails, like the county jails, there's people sleeping on the floor. There's bunk beds. California's converted gymnasiums into additional housing. And the prisons and the jails are overcrowded, and they just keep packing more in. And it's at a point now where it's not sustainable. I mean, they just can't. They've made as much money as they can off of it, but now it's the point where the courts are backed up 6 months or a year or more. And they just. I mean, you have prison guards and you have law enforcement making 6-figure salaries. A lot of these guys are older ex-gens and boomers making, I've seen as high as $300,000 in like Boston Police Department. Three officers in the Boston Police Department make $300,000 a year. California, easy 100,000. I've seen in Florida, where the average salary is like $46,000 a year for just general like income for like household income. I've seen jail guards and I've seen law enforcement making 100,000 plus. It's big business, and then the privatization of the prisons as well is even bigger business. So it's really just fake and gay, and the boomers have profited off the suffering, which is basically our title, the prison industrial complex, a business of human suffering. And they profited off the suffering of people. And it's not just a DEI or minority thing. It's all around. Everybody's got, the millennials have been screwed over, the X-gens and the younger generations have been screwed over by this prison industrial complex with the fake and gayness. I mean, you get a criminal record, even if you get arrested, that stays on your record forever in the United States. And simple as like DUI or like, stuff like DI is a little bit different, but I mean, like, let's say you make a mistake, you're going to have that record the rest of your life, and that can disbar you from employment, all kinds of stuff. It's fake and gay.
So my question is, I assume you're not against imprisoning people who commit serious crimes.
Oh, capital crimes? No, yeah, of course. Yeah. Yeah.
So you describe the prison industrial complex, and I understand it's a complex because there's a lot of different parts. You've got the building, the maintenance, janitor, sanitation of the upkeep, maintenance, guards, in, out, courts. You've got all of these moving parts. So that's all part of one complex, and it's mostly by the state, and some of it's being privatized. But the prison industry, we acknowledge, is necessary unless you're just going to execute people or cut off their hands for stealing. So my question is,
well, they don't even do that in Saudi Arabia anymore, the Middle East. That they've stopped that. That's considered barbaric in those cultures now. But go ahead. Sorry.
It is barbaric.
Yeah.
So my question is, what about, let's focus on the United States prison industrial complex. What is not just bad, but what makes this foul? What makes this corrupt?
Well, I mean, the thing is that the prison industrial complex isn't necessarily making money off of the capital crimes, because the capital crimes require maximum security, and that requires a lot of money and resources and officers, and that costs the taxpayer and counties and federal government a lot of money to incarcerate capital offenders. However, the money they're making is off of petty crimes. It's literally the money that they're making is just theft or like basic stuff, like drug crimes in particular. Drug crimes are non-violent offenders, and the federal government in the United States, and we see this throughout the rest of the world where they've adopted the federal basically sentencing guidelines. Drug offenders and even drug dealers, if you will, not even pushers, not like human traffickers or like drug traffickers, but like literally just daily drug users are getting like 2 years in prison, and they're nonviolent generally, and they make money off of them because they put them in minimal security, and then they just put them in a dorm, and they have them work in what's called they have an actual prison employment where they're making license plates and different stuff because they're trusted because they're not violent offenders, and they're basically slave labor. They're slaves. It's modern slavery. It's not a DEI thing, by the way, guys. I'm not talking about like this being a DEI issue. This is everybody. I mean, this is just regular working people that get caught with coke or some kind of drug or whatever. And as libertarians, we don't give a shit about drugs. I mean, as long as it's not hurting other people or you're killing people for drugs, do what you want, man. I don't give a shit about that. But I mean, like, the thing is like putting people in 2 years in prison for marijuana. I don't smoke marijuana. I don't use drugs. I'm sure you don't either, Adam. But I mean, at the same time, it's like, dude, why am I paying taxes? And then this prison industrial complex corporations profiting off of the suffering of 2 years for a drug charge, a nonviolent drug charge.
Where is this money?
The humanity
where is this money coming from?
Taxpayers, mostly taxpayers. So it's all taxpayer funded.
It's all taxpayer funded.
Mm-hmm.
So the government are creating the problem by, with draconian, expanded, war on drug as one example, but it's not exclusively that. And imprisoning people, especially for non-violent crimes, and the necessity of the complex to support the incarceration is a big business, and then you've got the incumbent players who lobby and have aligned interests to maintain and keep this going, and that creates perverse incentives where the government are locking more people up, using these people as slave labor, and importantly, there's kind of an almost endless source of public government funds to support this, and many people are making millions, billions, allegedly,
Trillions,
$1
trillion
industry.
So I mean, basically, like, look at the UK. Look, they're locking people up for nonviolent, like, speech crimes. In Germany, it's a crimes. They have speech crimes in Germany.
Oh yes.
And they're making money off of that. The government and these people working for this prison industrial complex in the UK are making money off of people just saying, "Hey, this is not right. I have my freedom of speech." And
someone,
like, "Fuck you, go
someone
to 10
posted
years.
"Love Your Nation" on a sticker and posted it on a mountain, like on a man-made structure up there on a mountaintop, and he got 2 years in prison, I think. I have personally racked up at least a century of prison time, potentially, if they wish to, just for things that I've said as a joke on Telegram or on some of these podcasts. And that's the UK, which I think is among the most draconian, but it's Germany. It's all over Europe. Germany's probably the worst offender on the continent, which I think has a lot to do with its history of kind of denazification and order following since then, or in general.
I mean, let's take an example of our Gonzalo Lira legacy group. Gonzalo Lira, our mentor that we started this podcast from, or at least I did, for that matter. All he did was he was telling his opinion on a conflict, although it was kind of stupid because he was in the country in which he was talking shit about. But at the same time, he didn't commit a crime. He just basically was like, "Hey, this is not right." He was like, blah blah blah, and they arrested him twice. Well, they detained him, interrogated him, then they arrested him again. He was tortured. They released him on bond. Then he tried to flee because he was like, "Dude, I don't want to die in prison in Ukraine. This is bullshit. I didn't do anything wrong." And they're not giving me adequate justice. And we'll get into the court system as well. There's a comment that was made. We're going to get into that as well, guys. DC 2004. I'll answer that question in a minute. But yeah, I mean, the other thing is like they ended up capturing him at the border. He was live on his I guess his X and YouTube channel saying, "Hey, I'm fleeing. I'm trying to go to Hungary." They're going to, obviously if he got to Europe, they wouldn't send him back to Ukraine. They'd probably deport him to America or whatever. But he didn't make it, and they sent him to prison back in Kharkov, and he developed pneumonia, and he died in the prison hospital. Yeah, he had pneumonia because he was a avid smoker. Yeah.
It was,
and the conditions were bad. They were fucking bad. They were
emphysema.
Yeah, emphysema. Yeah, it was fucking horrible, dude. I mean, just you're talking about some of the war. It's a war zone, and it's some of the most. It's one of the most corrupt countries, I think, in Europe.
In the
probably
world.
the most in the world, probably. Yeah, I mean, it's a failed state too. But I mean, you're literally dealing with all these things, and it's like the conditions have to be unbelievably horrible. I don't. I mean, it is what it is. So fortunately, like I said, it is. Yeah, go ahead.
So this is not something that I agree with. This is kind of devil's advocate, but I engage with lots of people, and they offer wrong opposing opinions. Some may say that what Gonzalo Lira did was a crime because there was a law. There is ongoing and was martial law, and he was saying things. Pro-Russian narrative propaganda, or at the very least critical of the Kiev regime and more favorable to the invading force. So there was a crime that was committed, and he ought to have been in prison. Now, I don't agree with that opinion whatsoever. There was no crime occur. He didn't cause harm to another being. However, there are these legal fiat, the will of the state, that the state is going to and does use incarceration as one of its main sticks to enforce compliance and coerce and violate people who it deems to be dissidents or any way pose or potentially pose a threat to its authority. So I just maybe you've got something to add on kind of the nature between the government having this ability to incarcerate people that it takes issue with, and kind of the perversiveness of the complex itself.
Right. Yeah, I mean, for the most part, laws are based off of norms, social norms, and it's community governance. Because we didn't law enforcement or policing is a modern concept. It's a modern construct. Historically, the military were used in order to quell or quarrel to keep dissidents and chaos from ensuing. A lot of like I said, modern policing is literally it's a modern construct, and now it's an industrial construct. So it's about profit over basically policing, or profit over keeping the status quo or keeping civil society.
Profit over justice.
There you go. And I mean, we go back to the courts, which you're English, so you understand what the courts mean. The legitimate origin of the courts is, the court as being royalty and nobility. And you would go to the court, you would go before the king, or you would go before a baron, or you go before, Lord of Manor, and you would plead your case. So if someone wronged you, I could get into Aristotle as well. We do have to get to that question though, but I'll explain kind of the background, the philosophy behind it. But more or less, like, you go to the court, you state your claim, and a lot of times it wasn't really criminal complaints. A lot of it was just civil issues. It was like, he wronged me, didn't honor the contract, or this worker just left and absconded, and they owe me money, and the king would be like, all right, I'll go grab them and take them back or put them in jail. A lot of it was taxation. I mean, taxation is one of the main reasons in the origins of the courts where you would go to prison. It was called what was it called? Debtor's prison. I don't know if you remember that historically, if you studied that in English history. But yeah, debtor's prison, where if you owe debts to the king or to the crown, or you owe debts to public debts, that they would incarcerate you, and your family would have to ransom you to get you out of prison. And we're going to see that again. We're definitely going to fucking see that again, because the IRS and a lot of these we're seeing that, and we're going back to that aristocratic system. We are definitely going to see that again, I think, in the near future, within the next decade. So
historically, the prisons as a function of the state has been used to extract revenue, taxation, exploit the people, plunder its resources, and again have that stick: give us money or else what? Off to prison. But it sounds as though with the industrialization of policing and the expansion of the complex of the industry, that things have become more perverse, and that with the progressive encroachment of the state becoming ever more totalitarian, progressive over time, that it's being used increasingly more so for ideological purposes, as well as
lawfare. The lawfare. Yep. Politically lawfare. Yeah.
As well as, and this is important, that they keep legislation on the books that criminalize activity that ought not to be, for the express purpose of maintaining a steady supply of people to be locked up.
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, like I said, the courts is basically just financial. That's the establishment of it, going back to Rome. It's all about commerce and business, politics, business is business. And the courts keep a fine line between politics and business. But unfortunately, like I said, it's not like it's new or anything. I mean, like I said, I gave you the historical and philosophical. Aristotle, going back to philosophical, Aristotle, said to make people whole. So the whole point of the courts and the whole point of judgment is so that people are whole. So if you commit a crime against somebody, you have to serve time. because that affects someone's mentality over time. You basically you're messing with their ability to function in society. So you have to pay in debt or in servitude. As far as for economic reasons, someone steals from you or someone dishonors a contract, then you have to pay retribution to make them whole, or you harm them through like a tort, a civil tort, then you have to compensate them for their loss. And that's the whole concept of legal theory. Yes.
So
we've gone away from that. We've gone away from it. It's impossible to sue now. It's so difficult. You're dealing with that right now. I tell people don't even waste your time because it's just going to go nowhere. A lot of times.
Yeah, I want to get into that. On one hand, you're saying that the government are inventing, like, for example, we'll take the war on drugs. It's the most prominent example, but again, not the focus of this conversation. The government knows and has known that it is not effective, and that it's there's a business here, there's a complex. The CIA are the ones shipping in the cocaine and the fentanyl, and it's all about money at the end of the day. But
money and political influence. So the exchange for political ideology, like we talked about the lawfare, they're using like if you go back to the South America with the was it the Contra issue, they were shipping guns and training military and shipping them to South America rebels, and they were shipping cocaine into America to fund that operation. And that has actually come out to be fact. So it was actually conspiracy theory until it became conspiracy fact recently, I guess in the last 10 years, 20 years. And actually a journalist was murdered over that too, by the way, that broke that story. He was allegedly murdered or unpersoned and gone away with.
Committed suicide with 2 bullets to the back of his head.
Yeah, exactly.
So on one hand, there's the manufacture of incarceration to support this industrial complex. On the other hand, you were talking about how, especially California and New York, you're saying they're broke and they're refusing to prosecute people, and that they're running out of money for these things. So can you please?
I think the situation is that the industrial, because a lot of the private prisons, I believe, are in California, Florida, and Upper Midwest, like Montana and this area. There's a lot of private prisons, Midwest too, as well, from what I understand. I have to go look at the data because it's changed over time since last time I wrote an article or paper on this. I was an undergrad, and things obviously change. That's 20 years ago or so. So I mean, things have probably changed since then. But yeah, I know in Florida in particular, there are California inmates in Florida private prisons. I do have a friend I don't talk to anymore. He actually got caught up and unpersoned because he was exposing a lot of this information about the private prisons and the fact that they were just shipping people to Florida because it was a third of the price, and California was charging the California taxpayer full price for to incarcerate them in California, and then sending them to a private prison in Florida, and I don't know, maybe pocketing that money or whatever. I don't know. You know what I mean? But the reality is that, like, yeah, these states are broke. California's broke. New York's broke. I don't think Florida is per se, because they're building more prisons. They're one of the biggest profiteers off the basically the prison industrial complex. So they obviously have enough beds, or they'll put you on bunk beds or whatever. They don't give a shit. The human rights in Florida is just, I mean, like in the prisons in Florida, they don't even have air conditioning, from what I understand. Could you imagine that? And I talked to inmates before. They said literally it was as if the walls were melting. How hot it was in there from the humidity. Like they said, it was. I mean, I just that's insane. I mean, I can't even say it, man. I just you lost audio. Sorry, I think you might be muted. Okay, there you go.
I know that the prisons generate some revenue via effectively slave labor. Like, I know there was a scandal with Kamala Harris where she was keeping especially young Black people in prison, especially when she knew they were innocent. She blocked them being released and whatnot so that they would exist as slave labor for California. But I can't imagine that this is the most productive for the states or the state treasuries to keep people locked up in prison. I imagine that, especially in the long run, if with good governance, that it's more profitable to not have them imprisoned. I know in the short term, with the perverse incentives, lots of people are getting rich off this, right? That's the ruling class and the
Mostly
shareholders.
boomers. Yeah.
But
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, I'm sorry to cut you off, but yeah, the thing is that it's in Europe. I'm not saying necessarily UK or Germany. It's mostly Northern Europe, Northern European countries. They have more rehabilitation approach to it and a more organic approach. So they actually, their prison industrial, they don't really have really a prison industrial complex. Theirs is more, let's try to get them integrated back into society. Any of the migrants that are arrested, they teach them the language. They put them from a language program and a jobs program, and they try to get them a job when they get out, and they put them in housing after they get out. So they try to transition them back into society. Versus in America, it's called corrections. So they're correcting bad behavior, and that's the concept. It's not about rehabilitation. And I interned with the Florida DOC, Department of Corrections, and I was like, dude, I want to take a more holistic approach, and I like, if I become a probation officer, I want to do this and that, and they're like, no, it's not going to work, dude. 98% of the people that come in through are drug charges. So once they get out, they start doing drugs again. And I'm like, well, so why are you locking them up for drugs then? It's illegal. I'm like, well, why don't you just make it legal, and then that way you can pretty much clean up about 80% of the people on probation, and then you can focus on the 20% that really matter. But we want to have a job. Yeah.
So I know that, for example, George Soros is paying prosecutors not to charge people with shoplifting, minor crimes, even violent crimes like robbery, street robbery, shoplifting, etc. That these prosecutors, especially in California and New York, are refusing to charge criminals with these. I don't know if that's the same going on with the drugs. It's just this remains a contradiction to me.
Even that concept, those are still petty crimes. I don't think they really need to be incarcerated. I mean, I think really what they need is they need to be put in the system, and they need to be put on probation. And if they can keep committing it, then they go to prison, because they're not learning. It's not good, and they have to pay that money back. Like that should be part of the restitution, is what we call it in legal terms. They should pay the restitution back to the person that they offended, making them whole. Aristotle's concept of making things whole. So like, yeah, community service, bud. You stole it. You might have got the money. If it's drugs or whatever, well, we're going to put you through a drug program, and you're going to get rehabilitated, and we're going to have you do community service.
I see a lot of videos of hoodlums in the USA stealing from grocery stores, electronic stores, makeup store, cosmetics, just going in, taking things, leaving, and especially California, so long as it's under $995, not being charged for this. So not necessarily drugs. Well, I can't imagine it's a good business to steal from drug dealers.
A lot of times people are stealing and committing prostitution and theft to pay for drugs. At its root, I would say about 70% of crimes are drug related. That's what I saw when I was interning. And that's what they're saying, is that even though that they committed theft or they did this and that, it's usually drug related. They're addicted to a substance that we know, of course, was brought in by the CIA. That's been proven, and it was the government that created the problem. And they think that the solution is to throw more money at it and to profit from it. And the boomers and the lobbyists and the military industrial complex people are like, "Fuck, I'm happy because I'm making money. What do I care?" You see, no one cares. That's the end of the day. Nobody gives a shit. And now we have the situation that we're in right now, where people are just stealing and they're not prosecuting because A, it's being encouraged, as you said, with Soros, and B, they just don't have the money to prosecute it. They really don't. It's both. It's like they don't have the money to prosecute it and incarcerate, and then on top of that, it's being pushed and encouraged.
So they're pushing, they're allocating all this money to funding the places and the complex, and at the same time, maybe in due part because of the incidents, the burden of funding the complex, it's reducing the propensity, the capacity of the state to spend where it actually makes more sense. For example, the courts, for example, building the roads, fixing the water system in Flint, Michigan.
Yeah, put them to work.
Fire
If
hydrants.
they're gonna theft, they need money. So it's like, well, fuck, put them to work. Be like, all right, here's your two options. You can go on probation and eventually go to incarceration, or there's a jobs program. What do you want to do? Just like in the Vietnam era, they would come in for drug charges and nonviolent crimes, and they'd be like, all right, you have two options. You can go to prison, or you can go to Vietnam. A lot of people chose to go to Vietnam.
Well, this is something. One thing that's good to compare is different countries' prison systems.
Yeah, of course.
I know in Russia, for example, and this is something that's not just of today, but it's been there for centuries, if I understand it correctly. It's always been serve time in work camps, penal colonies, especially out where no one else wants to work, like Siberia, or go join the military. And so
the gulags. Yeah.
The gulags,
the Soviets
yes.
are really good at that shit. Yeah.
But not
they built the Soviet Union, the gulags, the prison industrial complex. It worked.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, wasn't the most humane way of doing
things. Tens of thousands of incarcerated individuals have served in Ukraine, and thousands of them have been, have paid off their sentence and been let back into society. I'm sure tens of thousands remain there. My understanding is 33,000 mostly penal prisoners died during the assault on Bakhmut, and allegedly, if you believe their numbers, to liquidate about 80,000 Ukrainian soldiers, which is costly. But if those figures are to be believed, still very impressive.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, like I said, I think jails are probably necessary. I think the sentencing in America, because comparably to the United States, the UK sentencing is hugely different, and then Europe as well. Even Russia, to an extent, the sentencing is nowhere near as severe as America. That really tells you in a nutshell that something's not right. I mean, America gives away 10, 20, 30-year sentences like it's giving away candy. I mean, it's like why are they giving such long sentences? And it's like, oh yeah, they're profiting off of the incarceration. They're profiting off of, the labor. I mean, in the federal government, they give life sentences like it's like like they're giving away, free coupons to the buffet. I mean, I don't know how many people got life sentences for just basically marijuana possession.
In the UK, the mass murdering demon, they struggled to give him a minimum of 52 years in jail. Struggle. Whereas,
America, they'll put you to death. They'll hang your ass.
He deserved to be. Well, he should be worse than hanged. Beaten by a crowd. To near death and then hung, drawn, and quartered, perhaps.
But it's not so much the capital crimes in America. I mean, it's fine. I mean, it's life sentence, stuff like that. If it's proven, they have the appeal process, if it works, I don't know. There are a lot of people that are exonerated because they were wrongfully accused. Not necessarily if it was a DEI thing. Most of the time it is. Or it's a caste issue as well, being poor and just being someone they can point the finger at. And that's the aristocratic thing that we're talking about, the medieval times type shit. But I mean, for the most part, I'm looking at people just like possessing a firearm getting 10 years. I mean, you possess a firearm and it's 10 years. Like, what? That's retarded. I know a guy. I met a guy that he had no criminal record. No felony convictions in his record. He has a little bit of a drug problem, but apparently he applied for a firearm He went through the process, and he had a charge that wasn't cleared up north. He was down in Florida, and they charged him with a felony, possession of firearm, even though he didn't possess it. He was just applying, and they denied his application. And it's like, well, huh? But I mean, I read the law. The law does state that, you know, if you have, you're not supposed to apply if you have a felony. It's considered an intention or whatever. But yeah, I was like, damn, dude. And they railroaded him. And then he was serving probation for that particular charge. He was on probation for that gun charge. And I mean, come on, man. It's like, I mean, people are dumb. People are really dumb, especially people on drugs. And it's like, I don't know, man. I just see all kinds of crazy stuff. I you know, guys that are, I mean, if you have a felony, I mean, it's like, dude, you served your time. You should be able to own firearms. If you haven't had, like, you know, if you haven't killed somebody with a firearm and you're getting out, and the thing is, if you killed somebody in America, you're doing life in jail. So, I mean, I just don't understand it. Like, the way the law, we talked about this with the 14th Amendment as well, and that, like, it's just fake and gay. Like, the boomers have pretty much destroyed America as far as the legalities and the constitutional rights. And I don't get too far into that stuff. We're going to stick with the topic at hand, the prison industrial complex. But yeah, do you want to get to this question, or do you want to follow up with anything?
Yeah, we can get to this question. So beyond these immediate evils that we've discussed, which are, you know, kind of the perverse incentives, non-violent crimes, manufacturing incarceration, rehabilitation versus corrections, there's further much more perverse systems within this perverse system. So, for example, you have you know who you know which sex is more often raped in the world, just in general, or in America? It's men. So
yeah.
how can that be? Prisons. So
yeah.
People are murdered in there all the time. Now, sometimes they deserve it. But there's this kind of conveyor belt where you go in for a non-violent drug offense, and as a result of being in prison, you have to be hardened. You might have to stab someone. That you might have to, and by the end, you turn into a hardened criminal. Especially, I'm sure, juvenile detention. I'm sure there's all sorts of stories. There's also in the UK, there's an Islamification conveyor belt where you go in, and in order to get protection, they're like, convert to Islam. And so there's all that in the prisons. And DC 2004 says, what about child trafficking in juvenile prisons? So let's start with that.
Mm-hmm. I don't know. I haven't really dove too far into that. I know there's a lot of information, or a lot of conspiracy theory that has been proven conspiracy fact yet. But I do know the private prisons. They do have juvenile prisons in Florida, and they do bring them from other states. And there is alleged trafficking in that regard, for basically using them to make profit. So that, in a sense, is trafficking. You know, they're using humans to profit from their suffering.
Well, trafficking is forcibly transporting someone against their will, especially for purposes of exploitation.
Well, they're using it for labor as well, slave labor.
Mm-hmm.
That's exploitation.
So yeah, if you've committed a violent crime, you deserve to be punished. And if you're lawfully arrested and sent to prison for that, and you're transported against your will because you violated someone,
that's different.
But if you
non-violent crimes,
if you haven't violated
even
someone,
juveniles to an extent,
and you get assaulted, kidnapped, put into a back of a van, taken off, that likely fits the definition of trafficking. So especially you're smoking a joint or whatever at your home, and if you get thrown in the back of the van, taken off to California to work for the state, that would, per my perspective, be considered human trafficking,
So if
transportation
what you're
against the will
saying
for
is
purposes of
DeSantis and the Republican Party in Florida are human traffickers and probably the kingpin of human trafficking because most of the private prisons are in Florida and DeSantis profits directly from those private prisons. So they're de facto Rick DeSantis, governor of Florida, is a human trafficker. Oh my, what a concept.
Well, this is, you give the state the monopoly of violence, and they use this monopoly of violence, coercion, to enrich themselves at the expense and the interests of the people they rule over. And it's not done for purposes of order, of goodness, of justice, of law. It's done mostly for financial and ideological interests to enrich and entrench themselves, and you're the one that's paying for it generally, either directly by being subject to these, or indirectly through especially your
Taxation. Yeah, theft. Taxation is theft. Yep.
So I don't know much at all about child trafficking and juvenile prisons. I'm sure, again, we've talked that sexual assaults happen all the time in prisons.
I'm sure.
I do know that torture occurs all the time in government prisons, and not just prisons, in government asylum centers as well.
As well as mental health facilities, as well as in
that's what I meant. Mental health asylums. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So there was a BBC Panorama documentary expose that released in 2022, maybe 23, showcasing that the Greater Manchester Mental Health NHS Foundation Trust were systematically torturing people in their custody. And then I know that the largest human rights organization in Bulgaria, who are themselves a criminal organization, that the chairman released statements talking about how some of the worst institutional abuses he's seen was in these state mental health facilities, where torture was rampant, rights were completely invalidated, violated. It was terrible. And but he also is a complete hypocrite who doesn't care about these things. It's the Bulgarian Helsinki Committee, who themselves are serious violators of human rights and don't care about anything within their mission. So these things can happen in more corrupt countries like this one, more corrupt countries even than this one, like the United Kingdom, and countries which have rampant corruption like the United States of America, as well as more corrupt countries like Ukraine.
We gave all the examples, everything like that we know, and I know, and I've witnessed myself, and I've had direct, like I've interviewed multiple felons or convicted felons and wrongfully accused and wrongfully convicted felons, and yeah, everything I've given you, it's all fact. It's all stuff that I've gathered from the field. But go ahead, sorry.
No, it's there is institutional injustice. Beyond that, there is a systematic injustice where, these things aren't just ingrained and affecting the system, but sometimes these perversions, are methodological.
I know what you mean. Yeah.
Methodical,
okay.
Organized, and or deliberate. So it's not just systemic institutional suffering and injustice, but it's systematic. So they've designed this system to not maximize, that's not the right word, but to manufacture human suffering to enrich themselves.
Sorry, went down the wrong pipe. Yeah,
so the systematic manufacture of human suffering, prison industrial complex, and the many interests that are incumbent and entrenched and supported directly by the state, but this central monopoly on violence to plunder.
Yeah, I mean it's the lobbyists, man. It's just fake and gay. Like the lobbyists and Washington states, it's fake and gay. It's all about money. These are transactional societies. It's getting, it's gotten to the point where it's no longer about humanity or like keeping peace and civility. It's just profit over people. And I mean, I guess I don't know if you consider yourself a capitalist. I know you're libertarian like I am, but I mean, yeah, profits are okay. But I mean, the thing is competition. It's basically they have a monopoly on human suffering, and they have a monopoly on these complexes. And I don't want to go too far into that, but I mean, you know what I mean? Like it's literally just profits over people. That's it, and
monopoly is about you actively have to go against competition. So if I have a monopoly on selling water, I have to go and aggress against other people selling water. So I wouldn't say necessarily the government has a monopoly on human suffering. Like all sorts of people suffer, and the government doesn't go out of its way to stop to say we're the only ones that can hurt people. Or they say you can hurt people, we just want to have the capacity to hurt them more. I
agree with that.
But it's this systematic manufacture of suffering is by its very nature dehumanizing, and it's unjust. And I don't know if I think it's probably a whole other conversation to get into what can be done about this, alternative systems, or how could the current way be improved. But certainly,
I'll tell you how to be improved. Medieval times where the communities will become smaller and the communities would self-govern, and that's where I think we're headed to. Like I said, we're going to that medieval system where cities are going to crumble. They're going to get smaller. People are going to be leaving the cities. There's going to be smaller towns and villages, like we saw during the medieval period. And that's what we're starting to see as people are leaving the cities in droves because they're fake and gay and they're progressive and DEI, and we see that people are just running rampant with their heads cut off, kind of stealing it. It is what it is. We're seeing this in California and New York, which are the empire states. These are massive cities with lots of DEI and progressive leadership that is basically cucked betas and cucked alpha, fake and gay people that they don't give a shit. They just care about money and their status,
I have a slightly alternative view of urbanization and kind of a return to ruralism, which is that I think that a certain class group of people will continue to move towards cities, immigrate to cities, and go and live there. And I think the rest of us are tending towards not wanting to be in these big cities. So perhaps there's kind of I don't want to say it's a dualism because it's not. There's many, but perhaps it seems that the nature of the scale of these cities being so overrun and dehumanizing and industrial mean that necessarily they're going to be hellscapes, whereas perhaps the solution is to move away from the cities personally and with your friends and families, communities.
Well, that was the suburbanization during the 50s, where we started to see urban environments where there, basically people would move outside of the cities to these suburban areas, and then it became more peaceful. There was prosperity during the boomers, basically in general, and then it went back to people moving to the cities again. Is that industrial complex? As well as the industrial revolutions that created these mega cities, so to speak. We're in that fourth industrial revolution now.
I find the suburb to still be part of the city, and you can disagree with that. But it's like to be suburban, it's suburban to what? Suburban of the city. But it's within, they call it the greater city, right? The center, the urban center, and then the suburbs as well. Whereas I think what we're discussing more is going not necessarily, not abandoning civilization, not abandoning other people, not going, becoming hermits in the woods, but leaving the mega cities, where there's hundreds of thousands of people, millions of people even, and where it's just very due to the scale of problems and the scale of power and the concentration of power. It's difficult to experience justice and liberty.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you look at the founding fathers in America, and a lot of the founding fathers outside of like Benjamin Franklin, who was from Philadelphia, he was a city boy. Most of these founding fathers are farmers, man. They were from rural areas outside major cities, major metro areas. And they were thinkers. A lot of them were Sigma males. A lot were theists, though. They weren't necessarily Christian, but there were Christian revolutionaries. Excuse me. But for the most part, they lived in rural areas, and they were merchants and thinkers and scholars and statesmen. So like I said, we're going to be returning to that. I think we're going to be returning to that. And like I said, the podcast series I'm doing right now, the book that I'm working on for the locals channel, links in the description. Sigma males, authentic leadership, unleashing your inner Sigma male. This is what I'm talking about. This sort of thing is just, you don't have to detach from society, but it's good to get outside of the normie conformie industrial complexes of modern society and kind of be your own boss, be your own person, and learn and grow, being self-aware and authentic to yourself and to the community in which you serve. And the main thing about that with Sigma males and with the society as general, guy like Fight Club, you have just this close-knit community of people that you trust and are friends with and you communicate with. And I mean, the whole thing about these big mega metropolitan areas is that there's so many people and you're interacting with so many people during the day, it becomes fake and gay. There's no authenticity to it. So if you move outside the cities and you have these smaller communities, which is kind of what the suburbanization was in a sense, but further out than that, like you're saying, you're going to be in a smaller community around people that are like-minded, and you're going to be developing these social skills, and you're going to have real deep, meaningful friendships and authentic relationships based off of awareness, self-awareness, and effective communication. That's what I think the solution is.
There's one great quote that says something along the lines, "Those who don't move don't notice their chains." And another that says, "Happy slaves are the worst enemy of freedom." One thing you said there, and I'd just like to reiterate it, is that in order to have this authenticity, there needs to be some kind of individual authentic awakening, a kind of awareness of these constraints and the problems of modern society that that in your daily life, they're so ingrained and conditioned that you don't see them, don't notice them until something happens or until it gets so bad. And then you're coming at it from a perspective where kind of you're inside that matrix. Whereas if you're able to attain that understanding, awareness of kind of the abstractness of it all and what is objectively bad about it, then you can kind of recognize what are your genuine principles, what are your values, what about the modern world or big cities as one example don't you like, is not good, and then once you're aware of these things, how can I improve myself, my reality around me, in order to achieve my goals and my what it is that I seek ultimately.
Yeah. A lot of alone time too. Like Sigma males are very just like all the different Stoics in historical society, in ancient times as well as modern Stoics. A lot of alone time to be a thinker and to self-reflect, and that's what builds self-awareness and then authenticity, or like being authentic. Yeah, I mean, it is what it is. Like I said, I'll put a link in the description for the Sigma Male podcast. So if you guys want to follow that series, and join locals, join Adam's locals, support us, man. We're working hard to deliver you guys some really good content. I hope you guys enjoy it. Remember, thumbs up on our streams, and share it with people, with friends, family, and discuss. Write in the description. You have any questions, just write, and we'll answer we do this full time. So, I mean, we'll answer the questions as they come along. Anything you want to add? I pretty much gave everything. I think, we covered everything that we needed to. This is a good podcast, I think, for the most part. Anything at all? And I will conclude.
Just okay. The solutions: leaving cities, being more human, which is a greater emphasis on ruralism.
Authenticity, yeah. Self-awareness, authenticity, yeah.
That sounds good. All right,
guys. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Adam. Yeah, guys. Like I said, subscribe.
Join the Telegram.
Join the Telegram. Liberty Rising, links in the description. Gonzalo Lira Legacy Group, my Professor Redfield official, and join our locals channels. Thank you. Good night.